I see my screen okay?
Yep.
So the cost and data rate, we can see what's going on here. The cheap network has low data rate, low cost, 10 to 20 kilobits per second. That's, I mean, compare that to 100 megabits per second. It is extremely slow. Okay. But again, for things that don't need speed, as I say, for our power window systems, for HVAC systems, that's plenty fast enough because it doesn't have a complex um, amount of data to transmit. Can you guys tell me about CAN?
Most used right now.
It is the standard as of 2008. It is the communication standard required by OBD2. And what that gives us is it gives us quite fast data speed to communicate with the PCM and to also communicate within modules, whatever's connected to my CAN system. So we're going to focus on CAN today when we look at our networks. All right.
This graph here, does that just represent like the class A, B, and C on our textbook?
Yeah. So basically,
Okay.
they're talking. No, I'm sorry. Let me step back a bit here. This is strictly class C. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So these are both very fast data rates.
Okay.
Your book talks about a what is it, 10 to 15 or something like that, and then a 33, and then a over 100. Is that right? What are the data speeds for AB?
It just says class A is less than 10,000 bits per second. Class B is meaning 10 to 125 bits per second, and class C is 125,000 to a million bits
Okay.
per second.
Okay, so this is indicating FTCAN, you know, they might be considering that class B then.
Okay.
But what I can certainly tell you is that CAN B and CAN C, the signals are going to look similar. They're going to be two-wire communication. CAN A would be single wire communication. I've never honestly seen CAN A signals on a vehicle. I've only seen CAN B and CAN C.
Okay.
So they would call it medium speed and high speed. So, you know, they seem to say that one's FT and one's high speed. So however we want to look at that, we'll call it CAN B, CAN C in this slide.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that.
No, I was just confused on because like when I was reading it, I was like, oh, FT CAN and HS CAN, but
Yeah. So, and this is directly from the horse's mouth, right? I mean, this is from the people who are developing these systems and working with these systems. So, I mean, the information you're going to find in your book is different from stuff you'll find on the internet, and it'd be different from a different textbook.
Right.
So that's why I like this source. That's why I trust this source. And I would tell you that the ITA also is following the information within this video is very accurate. Okay, which I appreciate because I don't have to bring your attention to, you know, a textbook that we're not using to talk specifically about these networks. And guys, the other thing here, I know we're jumping ahead. I know we're talking about networking before we're even there, but because this video is up, I'm just speaking to the video, and I'll probably bring this up again later on when we actually go through the section. But you'd heard them talk about FlexRay and CAN networks, and it said arbitrary communication, and one said deterministic communication. Did anybody notice those terms they were using? FlexRay is very suited for safety critical systems.
High speed, FlexRay.
So yeah, so obviously it's got a lot of bandwidth. It's got 10 megabits per second, so it's got super high speed, real time. Mind you, CAN is no slouch at 1 megabit per second when we're talking about the high speed CAN. But it's not necessarily all about the speed in this case. It's about what they call the deterministic nature of FlexRay. And it's kind of like sending a registered mail, an envelope. right? So FlexRay sends a registered envelope with information in it going to safety critical systems. It knows that the module has received that information. So that's what makes it really safe. CAN does broadcast messaging. Does anybody understand what broadcast messaging is?
Goes to everyone, kind of.
Sends it out to everybody. Broadcast messaging is you sitting in an airport with 500 people, at the, in the waiting area for your, waiting for your plane, the boarding area, waiting for your plane to start boarding. And the clerk in the front of the room goes, "Oh, would passenger Jones come up to the front of the room?" Well, everybody in the room hears this message over the intercom, but only passenger Jones gets out of his seat. "Oh, that's for me." And he goes and deals with that. Okay. But is it possible that a broadcast message could go out and passenger Jones might be sleeping or just at that moment involved in a process and misses the message? Or deaf? I don't know. Is possible, right? So we need to know if I'm telling a module to apply the brakes on a vehicle, I want to know that that module is getting the message. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So sending a letter, registered mail, or couriering information, registering that thing so that it has to be signed off and given, I know that I've got that message has been received. That is for safety critical systems. And that is expensive, guys. Send a registered letter. Has anybody received a registered letter?
Comes with a tracking number.
Kind of like a tracking number. You could call it kind of like a tracking number. But has anybody sent a registered mail or received a registered letter? This is my fish right now, because basically if you have, it probably means you've got a summon at some points in your life. That's how they do it, right? You've broken the law or you're in trouble, or maybe you're just a witness or whatever. They send it registered mail so they know you get it. And they'll ask, "Are you such and such?" And you'll say, "Yes, I am." "Well, here you go. You've been served." That's the same kind of idea that we're dealing with here. I like the tracking number a little bit better. It's a little less negative connotations to it. So that's the difference between a FlexRay system and something that is, less, hey, we'll broadcast this information out. So Ethernet, they're talking about using Ethernet, which is how home is connected, right? Their Ethernet cable, that 8-wire, 4 twisted pair network protocol. It's obviously very fast. It's not very expensive for the speed, and it's getting into cars. But they're talking about strictly the connection between a gateway module and your laptop or computer, or scan tool, excuse me. They have most blocked out here, guys, but they did refer to it, and you saw it on the slide when they're talking about putting the network together. What's most used for? It tells you right in the name. What is most?
Most high speed.
It's definitely high speed, guys, but it's got some other huge advantages. Most network stands for, as I heard, media oriented system transport. Okay, now what is unique to most systems?
If it's broken, you still get
module
transferred.
to module communications.
Most is typically and I'm going to say for the sake of this course, most is fiber optic. The signals that we have on our vehicle that are most susceptible to noise are audio and video. Audio with noise is going to sound like static. Video with noise is going to cause pixelation. So both of those would be very sensitive to obviously the noise that exists in an automobile and around an automobile. So by using fiber optics, we eliminate that. So we get high speed, and the baud rate that we require for data, because it's data pig, it's a data pig video signals, right? So that's media oriented system transport, high speed, very expensive, fiber optic. So we'll delve into a little bit more of that stuff later, but since you had the video up, I thought I'd just throw this slide up there. This is really good information here. LIN network, single wire. CAN-LO, which isn't on here, single wire. The two CAN networks, we'll call them B and C here, are going to be 2-wire. And wire, copper wire, guys. FlexRay, copper wire. Yeah. Is LIN and CAN-A the same? Is LIN a class A? If it's just talking speed-wise, if it fits to 10 to 20 kilobyte per second, then yeah, we're okay. I could call that a class A system, like a low speed network, but it's not CAN. Yeah, but it's a different protocol. One of the things that is specific to LIN networks, guys, LIN networks, did you hear what he said about the source voltage?
14.
Yeah. So most of our networks toggle, as you probably read through the book, sometimes between 0 and 7 volts for, you know, what is that one? I don't remember the name. I don't have my book in front of me. So LIN is really specific in its protocol because it uses battery voltage as.
Oh, that was GM Class 2 communications.
Class 2, which is also called. I gotta open my book.
Oh yeah, 0 and 7. Class 2 is used for most high-speed communications between powertrain control modules.
What page you on?
Oh, 517. Sorry.
Yeah, so UART, you'll see on page 517, you'll see that it says General Motors Communication Protocols. I told you guys not to worry too much about all these different protocols. I really want you to focus on the ones we're looking at. But there are protocols that are used universally amongst manufacturers, and those protocols have their own place in the data link connector. And one of those networks is UART. UART stands for Universal Asynchronous Receive and Transmit. So it is a single wire network. It does have a place. It does have an ISO designation. And it does have a place within our data link connector. So it is a common protocol. And there's other ones in here that are also common protocols. And manufacturers often change the name of them to make it their own. Okay, but they fit a standardized protocol. Some of the standardized protocols are listed on page 527.
Any specific ones you want us to remember?
I want you to remember the 4 protocols that we talked about: LIN, CAN, FlexRay, and MOST.
Okay.
Okay, those are the ones I want us to focus on. But what I'm suggesting here, guys, is for your knowledge and just moving forward, we have pin designations within the data link connector that are specific for standardized protocols. And you'll read on the column, page 527, it says General Motor Vehicles, SAE J1850. That is a standardized protocol. Okay, you'll see under Asian ISO 9141. And these all have a place in our data link connector that you see under figure 30. You'll see Ford uses J1850 PWM instead of VPW as GM uses. So those are 3 common protocols that we might see used on vehicles. So they have a designated space within the data link connector. Okay. And if you look at all the pin designations, as I say on figure 30, what you discover is that there's something missing for starters on this. So this picture is from an older vehicle, pre-2008, that we're missing something on this. Something that I need you to know. I'm asking you what's missing on the pin designation on page 527 on the top OBD2 DLC data link connector. You'll see pin number 6 says manufacturer's discretion. Pin number 14 says manufacturer's discretion. As of 2008, the pin designation for 6 and 14 are CAN. 6 is CAN high, 14 is CAN low. So just correct that in your book. Show those in your book. 2008 and newer, CAN network.
Six and 14, you said, right?
Correct.
Is 6, you said high?
6 is CAN high.
Okay.
14 is CAN low. Or sorry, yes, 14 is CAN low, 6 is CAN high. And you'll see the correct designations, guys, on page 518, figure 10. And in this case, they're calling it GM LAN, and this is where it gets confusing. It's not, GM is just relabeled CAN into GM LAN in their literature. But it is CAN network, it is CAN protocol. Okay, we're not done here, guys. Like I said, I'm just bringing these topics up because this is on our screen right now, and I really appreciate you filling the dead airspace while I rebooted my router with something for you guys to watch, and that's awesome. Again, someone please double check that link for me. Make sure that link is hot, and so you guys can watch it at a later time. And I apologize that it didn't work. I did test it last night and it opened up perfectly for me, so I'm not sure what happened between then and now. Maybe it's to do with my internet connection. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's working now.
So I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm not going to hit everybody for questions, but I will just throw it out there. Is there any comments from you guys? Anything that you want to make sure you cover today? Any questions you have for me? Please throw them out there now. I'm not gonna hit everybody, but I'll just say, hit go. Got something? Speak, please.
No,
There
mine,
is, sorry, go ahead.
Steven?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when I was reading like the CAN and networks communications, like that was confusing. So just going over it, watching the video, and then probably going over it later when we're supposed to is probably gonna make a little bit more sense to me. But
Awesome.
overall, that was pretty much it as far as the readings went.
OBD2 stuff makes sense for you?
Yeah, the OBD2 stuff and the OBD diagnostics and the process is all, like you said, it was like a lot of review and like diagnostic tree stuff, but yes. That's, yeah, pretty much it.
Okay. I do, by the way, have a plan today to just connect up to a vehicle and just look through the menus that you might see if you're on the OBD2 side of a scan tool. Some of you guys, if you're working at a dealership, you might not see the OBD2 side. If you have a generic scan tool or a Snap-on scan tool, you'll see this. So I will do that, and we'll look through some of the menus, and we'll find out about calibrations, which is important. How do we know if there's a scan update available? So we'll cover that as well.
Okay, yeah, like at work, we don't really use the Snap-on scan tool that much. Only more so to like program like keys and stuff because it's quick.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't do a lot of like I don't use the generic ones that much. So yeah, I guess that'd be a pretty good to show us once we get there. Yeah.
Perfect. And guys, if you have access to the factory side, it's just more information. It's just more detailed information. If you go to OBD2 side, and I'm talking about generic OBD2, you're going to get a lot less. You're only going to get what's required. So I don't choose OBD2 side generally unless I want to do some quick checks, and in some cases it's really handy. So yeah, we will look at that, and I totally get that some of you guys may have never fully been into the OBD2 part of your scan tool. Did you have something, Stephen?
Oh, I just want to clarify. Talks about types of DTCs: Type A, Type B, CD.
Yep.
And there is a misfire A and misfire B. Are they the same thing?
No.
Okay, good. So
a Type A misfire is indicating that it is in the catalyst damaging range. So if the car were to be continued to be driven, it would damage the catalytic converter. Enough air and fuel is getting into the cat to cause it to overheat. So in that case, it's not a 2-trip code. As soon as the PCM detects a misfire of that frequency, which is quite often, it's going to turn on a check engine light and flash it in your face.
Okay.
As long as the misfire is occurring, the check engine light will flash. If the misfire stops because maybe you took your foot off the gas, the check engine light will just glow bright.
Got it.
A Type B misfire is suggesting that it's not catalyst damaging. So it's going to be a 2-trip code. And when it sees it for either an extended period of time, depending on how the manufacturers have programmed this, usually it's just extended periods of time that will turn on the light. So if it sees it over 2 minutes, automatically the light will come on, but it won't flash. And it's only indicating that your emissions are more than 1.5 times the federal test allowance.
Okay, good.
Okay. Anybody else got a question?
I think Moses does.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
I think just wording. I'm kind of confused. It talks about enabling criteria and enabling conditions.
Do you have a page number for me to refer?
Yeah, just 494, just the title, enabling criteria, and page 496, enabling conditions. It talks about the same thing. Right?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I just quickly looking at it, guys, enable criteria. So I've never really paid much attention to that before, Stephen. It's a good indication here, but the enabling criteria is something that is the term that I use when I'm talking about what it takes for a monitor to run.
Okay.
So I would use these terms rather interchangeably. But what they seem to be talking about under the enabling criteria on 494 is they're also talking not just about the conditions for that test to run, but also referring to the software program that is the director for the test to run. So it might reach all of the, what I'm going to refer to quickly as enabling conditions. So we got the right cruise speed, we got everything going on for an EGR test to run. So conditions are all there, but the task manager might say, you know what, the cat hasn't run, it gets priority and it's seeing the correct conditions for the cat as well. So that we're gonna let it go. We're gonna let you run. So both might be able to run, but only one will be allowed to run, and the task manager will decide who that is based on priority. So that's the only difference I would see in these two names, but I'm going to suggest for the sake of this course, you can use the terms interchangeably.
Got it.
Great question. Because I'm going to kind of pick up where we left off yesterday. And this is going to perhaps duplicate our conversation slightly, but it's all good, I think. Maybe I could ask you guys some questions. See what kind of retention we have here. I'm perhaps going to pick on individual people here. So please don't just blurt out an answer. I'm going to go through my list. How about Jackie? Jackie, I'm going to ask you a question.
Got it. All right.
Continuous monitors.
Yeah.
Can you give me some continuous monitors? There's 3 continuous monitors specifically listed. What are they?
The field trim one, the misfire one, and the comprehensive one, right?
Awesome. And the comprehensive one we'd also call a component monitor. Awesome. Thank you. Very well done. How about Jake? Can you list me 2 different non-continuous monitors?
I don't know off the top of my head, to be honest, right now.
Okay, so I want you to think about tests that don't need to be run continuously. They only need to be run at most once per drive cycle.
Right.
So think about emission systems that need to be run. EVAP, excellent. What else?
Yeah, sorry, my brain's kind of slow this morning.
No worries. Just think of an emission control system.
Oh yeah, sorry. I guess CATs.
CAT, absolutely. EVAP and CAT. And guys, those are typically the 2 hardest monitors for the computer to run because they're the hardest monitors for us to set as technicians. Okay, good. How about Moses? Give me 2 more non-continuous monitors.
Hello?
Hey,
Okay, sorry, my mic wasn't working properly. I'm with Jake on that. I don't really know off the top of my head.
Okay, well, you know some emission control systems. We've talked about many of them. So what other emission control systems do we have in a vehicle?
I'm drawing a blank this morning. Sorry.
Someone help them out.
EGR.
Tom.
EGR and what else? PCV.
PCV.
EGR, PCV. Yeah, absolutely.
O2?
O2 is basic, it has continuously monitored and non-continuously monitored components within it, yes. So we're not going to constantly check for O2 sensor switching time, right? But we will be checking the heater circuit, making sure that it has electrical continuity. So yes. Also thermostat. If a thermostat is stuck open, would that increase my exhaust emissions by 1.5 times FTP?
Yep.
Yeah, it senses a cold engine for too long, and that increases my exhaust emissions.
So basically, your non-continuous monitors is your
Emission?
emission, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
If it's not tested in a non-continuous monitor, if it doesn't have its own sequence of tests, it'll be covered under the comprehensive component monitor, looking for rationality, functionality of different devices. It'll have tests that it'll do, but basically most of our emission systems, and not just emission system, I mean, a thermostat's not technically an emission device, is it? It's to get my engine up to heat, to temperature, right, so it can run efficiently, which in effect is, well, an emission system, I suppose. Okay. So yeah, it's important that you guys know the difference between continuous and non-continuous monitors, and that you understand the enable criteria part in all this. There's no point in doing an EGR test, guys, unless the engine is in closed loop, warm, when that EGR valve would be operated normally. There's no point in opening it at idle doing a test. So it needs specific driving conditions for that to happen. So let's just say that you have done repairs on a EGR system and you've reset the code. How do we know that the problem's fixed? Is there a way to be sure?
The car has to go through the same conditions for a couple drive cycles, warm-up cycles.
How to go through enable criteria?
Go through mode 6, check the value, min and max.
So yeah, we'll talk about mode 6, guys. Mode 6 is really challenging for us to use. I will not lie to you guys. I'm not going to say it's an easy thing to do. We'll look at it. But yes, mode 6 is a possible way of doing it. How else could we do it?
Abe was talking about the test drive, right? So 40 cycles, the light will go away after the repair.
Fair, and I agree with you. The light will turn off if a check engine light is on after 3 successful trips, right?
3 trips. What about the 40?
That's a warm-up cycle, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The 40 warm-up cycles is to erase the code from the PCM. So the PCM will still be in the vehicle. Okay, guys, we're going to look at this car this afternoon. I did the 05 Corolla, and I created a P0171 code. I didn't erase it. I fixed the vacuum leak, and I drove the vehicle. The light turned itself off after 3 successful trips. Consecutive successful trips. The light's gone, but that code should still be in there because it has not gone through 40 warm-up cycles since we set that code. So We'll see if it still shows up under history codes on that vehicle. History code. Pending code will only be stored until it sees a successful trip, right? And then the pending code's erased. So pending code is the first code of a 2-trip code.
The first fault in a 2-trip code. Or two
Correct.
fault.
First fault,
Trip.
like the failure of a 2-trip code.
Okay.
So once it sees a successful trip, after that, it's gone. It doesn't stay. It needs to see 2 of them consecutively. And guys, as I say consecutively, please remember this. Consecutive trips for different monitors could be very different. A cat might have 2 consecutive trips a month apart, even though the vehicle's driven every day, because it's not seeing the enable criteria where we're cruising for 4 minutes without changing throttle position very much. Steady throttle for 4 minutes. How many of us get a chance to do that? Seriously, put your hand up if you drive regularly with your foot steady on the throttle for 4 minutes.
Not regularly, but like yesterday, I drove out to Langley. Would that not count?
That would count. You probably hit enable criteria for your cat monitor. But I didn't see any other hand in this room going up.
I guess me as well, because I have to go on the highway from Delta all the way to White Rock.
So yeah, you're in. So your cat monitor's probably running every day.
Yeah.
Tom's ran once yesterday, but who knows when the last time it ran? I don't know when the last time my cat monitor ran because I don't drive on the highway much, not heading into the college every day. Prior to that, going to the college every day, I was doing cat monitors twice a day. So it's needs to be consecutive. So basically when the enable criteria are met and the test is allowed to run through its entire course, we're going to call that a test, a completed test. If it fails, we're going to set a pending code. A week later, if it sees the enable criteria and is allowed to run and it passes, that pending code's erased. Doesn't exist. A week later, if it fails, we set a pending code again. A week later, if it fails again, or even the next day, just the next time it sees this enable criteria, we're calling that a consecutive trip. Then we'll turn on the check engine light if it fails twice consecutively. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Antonio, help me out here. How is an output checked? What do we test an output for?
Rationality and function.
So functionality, and we check it electrically. We monitor it electrically as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. How about Jackie? How do we test an input?
Why me again?
How do we test an input? What is an input tested for?
Like input sensors. Like what?
Yeah.
If it's like giving the correct signal.
Okay, so
like
what term do we what term do we use for that?
Rationality.
Rationality. Awesome. Rationality, and we check them. Rationality and
Functionality.
Yeah, functional.
not functionality for an input, right?
Oh,
Rationality is making sure that the sensor's reading correctly, and electrically, right?
Yeah, electrical.
oh, electrically.
Right. Because I can't turn an input off or on, right? It's just an input. I can't check the functionality. I can only check the rationality of it. I'm just trying to find a quickly. So in service information, I thought I had it in front of me here. I do not. But this little conversation here may help. This drive cycle they're talking about, drive cycle is something that I would do to a vehicle to help it reach the enable criteria for our monitors. And they say fuel tank half full. Well, we know that we need between 15 and 85%. So let's make sure we got at least a half a tank. Engine cold start. So when the key turns the on position, a lot of our monitors want to see the IAT ECT correlation. That way the vehicle knows it's been through a cold start. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So cold soak, it says idle for 10 minutes, drive on the highway 55 to 60 with steady throttle for 16 minutes. Return to an idle for 3 minutes. Drive again at 40 kilometers an hour for 8 minutes, return to an idle for 3 minutes, and then repeat it the next day. Okay, so you can find actually much more specific drive cycles. I'll see if I can find one later, or maybe you guys can find me one for an EGR, and you'll see exactly what you need to do, what conditions you need to drive the car under. Okay, so what you could do is reproduce that drive cycle and then check your monitors to see that you've effectively repaired the vehicle. And I suggest you guys do this if you've got a problematic car. Let me just state this. If I have a vehicle in the repair bay and I've got a P0401 code, which is a low flow EGR, and I discover that the EGR passage is plugged, so I get my Speedo cable, fray the end of it, clean it out, blast it with some carbon buster, and clean it all out, put it all back together again, bidirectionally control the EGR valve open, the engine stumbles and runs really rough and almost stalls. I'd say, okay, I think I've got the problem resolved here. But the only way for me to be sure is to let the EGR monitor do its own test. And once it's done its own test, then I know for sure that it's passed. And remember, because it passes, doesn't tell me how well it passed, by how much it passed. If I really want to know, then we need to get into mode 6 to find out the actual test result. Does everybody understand what I'm referring to here? Okay. So because a test is passed does not mean it's good. It just means it passed at that time if it's really close to borderline. So for those problem cars, guys, that's when we want to do mode 6 or keep the vehicle for a couple of days to make sure we can duplicate the drive cycles. What else do we need to know? What else did we cover yesterday as far as chapter 38?
I think that's about it. That's where we ended up.
Okay. Suk was going to tell me what a trip is. What is the definition of a trip?
It's like a necessary procedure you have to do before driving with the key on.
Okay. I think what I heard you say is a trip is different for all our monitors.
Yeah.
So key on, followed by the necessary conditions for a particular test, or we call it enable criteria, followed by key off. As we've said, the enable criteria for a CAT trip is going to be very different for the enable criteria for an evaporative system test. So 4 minutes, steady throttle. That CAT trip may not happen very often, as we mentioned. Okay. What about a Chris? What about a warm-up cycle? What's a warm-up cycle?
Just drive up to certain temperatures. Depends on the car, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we have specs in your book saying, you know, basically 22 to 70 degrees Celsius. So once the car hits 22 degrees and 70 degrees, we would call that a warm-up cycle. And the PCM uses these to detect how many times the vehicle's been driven for a reasonable period of time to erase a code. Everybody okay with the conversation Steve had earlier with the type A and type B misfires?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So type A flashes, type B will just stays there.
Type A flashes when the misfire is occurring. It'll turn the check engine light on immediately. A type B will let that misfire go for a while before it turns on the check engine light. We say 2 trip, but when something's happening continuously, sometimes it's just on a timer. So after 2 minutes, it turns on a check engine light. So if it sees a couple misfires, nothing happens. Sees a couple more, pending code, right? Yeah, so it needs to see it happen for a period of time before we would set a code.
So a steady mill light on would be emission related, and then a flashing would be damage to the cat.
Yeah, obviously, and without having to say, also incredibly high emissions, right?
Right.
But flashing is, now we're into catalyst damaging territory. So high emissions and cat damage. So flash that light, give that customer a warning. I actually had a customer come in and tell me their check engine light was intermittent. And what it was on, and when they accelerated, the light would flash. And then when they come back to an idle again, the light would just turn on steady. So they just said the light was intermittent. They didn't realize the flashing was indicating you're damaging your cat. And so when someone phones you up on the phone and says my check engine light's on intermittently, I don't put that as a high priority. I didn't book them in that day, said, bring your car down, drop it off, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. I said, okay, yeah, fine, we'll book you in for next Tuesday. And they drove the car for a week and burnt the cat up. But my bad, I didn't really ever make a connection between an intermittent check engine light and a check engine light that's flashing sometimes and stay steady on at other times. It's like people's description of what's happening can be a little bit confusing.
Have you seen a situation where the engine light's still on when the key's off?
No, but that would probably be an indicator, probably an indication that you've got a shorted wire to the PCM or a bad PCM. Like something happened with bulb check mode.
It's just really weird. I've never seen that, but like I've seen it once, but
PCM controls the ground for the MIL. Okay, the cluster controls the bulb check mode. So when you turn the key on, the check engine light turns on, bulb check, and then turns off again, right? So many manufacturers, that's the way it's done. Some are only controlled through the PCM. So the only thing that could cause that would be a problem with the cluster. And I say the only thing, problem with the cluster, problem with a bad ground somewhere or something shorting to ground, or the PCM, because it shouldn't be supplying a ground at that time. And I don't even think it should be supplying a power. I've never seen it.
Okay.
So designations for codes, guys. I will not ask you to remember all of the specific subsystems, but I will ask you to remember the P, B, C, and U and what they mean. Powertrain codes are the ones that are regulated specifically by OBD2 specifications. This is listing 0 is generic codes, which is correct. So P0 code means that code P0171 is the same on all cars. You don't have to go and look it up. But a P1 code is going to be manufacturer specific, and it usually on your scan tool gives you the description of the code right in front of you when the code is set. So you don't have to remember codes. Specific vehicle system, guys. Specific vehicle system. There is a list in your textbook, right?
Yeah.
I don't want you to remember them. I don't remember them all. You don't need to remember this because, well, they're listed with your codes. So, but it does list them, page 496. It talks about air metering and fuel system fault, injector faults for P200s, 0200s, ignition for P03s, mission control system fault. That's like CAT, EGR codes. .500 is idle, vehicle speeds. Guys, 600 codes are often internal PCM failures. 700 is transaxle codes, transmission transaxle codes. Guys, think of what's changed in transmissions in the last 20 years. 25 years since OBD was mandated. We've gone from 3- and 4-speed transmissions to 10-speed transmissions.
And CVT.
CVT. Think of all the codes that are being generated by all of these systems. We only have room for 100 codes for the specific designated fault here, right? 00 to 99 is 100 specific fault codes. So we have way more fault codes than we have room. So what did we do?
Added.
Generalized codes.
Added letters now.
Put letters in. So it's still the same 5 alphanumeric code, but it'll be a P0A, PA9. You'll have a letter in there, and you don't have to try and figure out what that means. It's not hexadecimal. It's just, it gives us 26 possibilities for one of those characters. And I don't know mathematically how many more codes that creates, but it creates pretty much an unlimited amount of codes for each designation. Okay. Guys, I'm looking at page 496 still, and it talks about types of DTCs. I want us to just remember the type A and type B misfires. I don't want you to get confused with what they're speaking to on this page. So you can read this information, and diagnostic trouble code priority. That's all the PCM is going to do. It's going to, if it can only display one code, it's going to display the highest priority code. I think for the vehicles we're working on, guys, it's going to display all the codes in the vehicle. So I don't want you to worry too much about the statements there of types of DTCs or trouble code priority. Okay.
When they say trouble code priority, what do they mean?
So again, I don't want you to worry about this, because what's going to happen is those codes are all going to show up on my screen. What they're saying is codes of higher importance would overwrite a code of lower importance. A misfire code is going to overwrite an IAT code if you only were able to have one code display on your scan tool. Or one freeze frame to show up. So higher priority code would overwrite a lower priority code. But as I say, my experience is that vehicles have enough memory to be able to store multiple codes and multiple freeze frames.
Brilliant.
Okay. So don't waste your time, or don't spend a lot of energy trying to remember that. Guys, there is conversation on page 497 around pending codes, a conflict, and suspending some of our monitors from running. What they're trying to do is make sure that we are getting proper test results. So I'll give you an example and a scenario. So I have a customer that comes in, and please forgive me if I've told you this story. I might have told it previously, but a customer comes in and they've got a check engine light on. It was diagnosed by another shop 6 months prior. Okay, and it was a simple code, IAT code. She'd already paid for the diagnosis in another shop. She came in and said, here's the code. They diagnosed it. It needs an intake air temperature sensor. Could you replace it for me? I said, sure. You know, new customer. I wanted to make sure that it was an IAT code, and I scanned, and it was, in fact. It was pretty quick test, guys. Basic ohm test on the sensor itself. The sensor was open. So I was very happy just to replace the sensor and give her car back. Car was back 3 days later. Check engine light was on. Why?
Broke it.
I tell you this, it wasn't because an IAT sensor had failed. Why would the light come back on after 3 days? What did I not do that I should have done? I should have charged a whole lot more money and done something else.
On the task through like an enable criteria or drive it?
So what I should have done is run it through a drive cycle to check the monitors, because if I'm losing the intake air temperature, is it not enable criteria for some of my monitors to run?
Mm-hmm.
So my monitors will be suspended. They won't run until this input is there. So what had happened 6 months prior, she didn't have the money to replace the sensor, so she just kept driving the vehicle with the check engine light on. The monitors that are affected by that are suspended. I put the new intake air temperature sensor on, plug it back in. Well, in those 6 months, something else had failed, but it didn't show up because guess what? The monitor never ran.
Oh my God.
So that's something we have to be aware of. You know, ask a customer, how long's the light been on? If it's been on a long time, there's a chance there might be some underlying concerns there. Okay, so just read the pending, the conflict, and the suspend there, because it does help to give us insight into how the system functions together, how that enable criteria and the monitor and issues play into that. Guys, I'm gonna move on to our mode 6 chapter if everybody's okay with the information we've covered here. Any questions you have regarding this, please let me know. It's important stuff.
I'm okay to move on.
I actually will bring up just another conversation here around mandatory PIDs. So OBD2 only requires one freeze frame to be stored by regulation, but manufacturers can put as many in there as they want, and that's what we find they do. The freeze frame must contain all this information. These are required PIDs to be stored when there's a fault code, even a pending code. And we've looked at this data before. And remember, never erase this until the car is repaired and you know what conditions that code was set in. Drive it under the same conditions to verify your repair. This freeze frame, guys, can be, the manufacturers have all the free will to add any other PIDs they want. So some manufacturers will give you 50 PIDs in a freeze frame. More information, the better. If the technician has more information, you're going to have more opportunity for a more accurate repair. Okay. Guys, I'm going to move on, but I think we need a break. I need a break. So how about we take, I got 9:27. Let's come back at 9:30, 9:40. Give you 13 minutes.
Okay.
Hey guys, welcome back. I've changed my background to reflect what we'll be doing after we look at OBD2, but we'll be looking at a network. We'll build a network on the bench, and we'll start doing some testing on the network and see what we can discover. I'm going to have a fairly brief conversation with you guys on chapter 39 on mode 6. And this, we're going to go into global OBD2 stuff here as well, but the mode 6 is just one of the modes in global OBD2. One of, I call them the filing cabinet drawers. What's in this drawer? What do we do with this drawer? Okay. We'll look at these modes, most of them on the vehicle when we hook up our scan tool, and just see what we discover inside there. So we've talked about OBD2, and we've talked about it from the factory side, where the manufacturers can enhance the data that we get, and instead of having, you know, certain mandatory PIDs, they can pretty much, you know, including those, do whatever they want, and they often give us far more information on the factory side of OBD2. And as I say, how do we know if we're on the factory side with our scan tool or if we're on the generic side with our scan tool?
Zeros and ones?
0 and 1, yeah.
Well, you know, that's interesting. We don't see that. When I have my scan tool connected up, I have an interface. My scan tool is seeing 0 and 1s from both sides of the coin here. But the difference is, for OBD2, I don't need to identify a vehicle. For, excuse me, for generic OBD2, I don't need to identify a vehicle. Okay. If I'm on the factory side, if I don't get the year, make, engine size correct, I might have the wrong data coming at me. Has anybody had that before, where you key in the wrong car and you can't find a module? Or ever seen this? So I call it garbage in, garbage out. If you give it the wrong information, you might get the wrong information. You know, luckily for us, you know, if it's, you know, not a big radical change from like a new model year coming out, maybe the information's the same. Okay. I've told you the story of hooking up a Ford, looking up a VIN number for a Ford, not looking at the VIN, but looking at the door sticker and getting a 12/95 production date, and the vehicle is actually 1997. So if I had just keyed that in based upon 95 or 96 production year, it would have been the wrong vehicle. And it was, and we ordered a bunch of wrong parts because, well, I had to learn my lesson somehow. So garbage in, garbage out. With OBD2 global or generic OBD2, they're not asking for your make model. They typically say, is it a 6 or 12 volt vehicle? Or is it above or below a certain gross vehicle weight, depending on what years you're looking at? Okay, that's how you know you're on the global side of things. A lot less PIDs. There is a benefit here, guys. Do you remember we talked about baud rate? If you have a vehicle, an older vehicle like the Corolla outside, is not a CAN vehicle. It's got K-line communication. That was that ISO 9141 protocol that I asked you not to remember, and I don't want you to remember it, but it's a fairly slow protocol. So going into OBD2 gives me less PIDs, so I might speed up the information flow without even having to make custom data lists. Thoughts? So guys, here's the important things to catch from OBD2. OBD2 is emissions only. You're not going to go into OBD2 generic and look up ABS. You're not going to go in there and look up body controls, power windows. None of that stuff exists within OBD2. It is strictly dedicated to emission repairs. Clear?
Yep.
So our scanner is considered what, OBD2, or they just call it a generic scanner where it does everything, like a Snap-on?
I'm talking how you enter the diagnostic system on the vehicle will determine what system you're looking at.
No, okay.
Okay, so if you enter it as generic OBD2 or global OBD2, and it doesn't ask you to identify the vehicle, you're in the OBD2 side. If it asks you to give the year, make, or it says auto ID, where it automatically looks at the VIN number and then tells you you're working on an 05 Corolla 1.8, 1Z, whatever, that's identifying the vehicle. You're on the factory side of OBD2. You're on the side that they can take the basic OBD2 program and then enhance it to their needs, always including the original OBD2 stuff. They can add more. So that's where we typically go. So the difference between OBD2 Global and OBD2 Enhanced is how we enter the diagnostic component within our PCM. Okay. Well, I promise you, when we hook up the scan tool, we'll go both ways. We'll look and see what it looks like in either case. Okay. The other thing, as I mentioned, if you're on the factory side, you can select all the different modules that you're capable of communicating with. You can get into airbags, you can get into ABS, you can get into all that stuff. Global side, no access. Purpose of OBD2 is for inspection and testing of vehicle emission control systems.
From the factory side?
No, that's what OBD2's mandate is.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It is strictly emissions based. It is there for the purpose for inspection and testing of emission control systems.
That's it.
Okay.
Right. So strictly emissions, not like you don't do a function test on like your windows or whatever.
Correct. You can if you go to the factory side.
Right,
but not through OBD2, because that's all OBD2 is concerned with. Everything on the factory side is what they want to put in there. And OBD2 encourages manufacturers to use that data link, right? Because think about this. Could a manufacturer put an OBD2 connector and give you only OBD2 generic information from there? Yes, they could. And they could still use their factory OBD1 connector, we'll call it, their specialized connector, to do any factory enhanced stuff. Has anybody run into that? Okay, it happened when OBD2 first began because they had to comply with OBD2 standards to sell cars in Canada and the United States, but maybe they weren't ready to integrate it with the rest of the software of the vehicle. So you would find vehicles that had the factory scan tool, data link connector, and the OBD2 data link connector. Now, they realized, hey, why put two connectors in there? OBD2 has given us all the flexibility to use the manufacturer's discretion pins however we want. So doesn't that make more sense? I think so. Let's put this on the screen. So what do I like about OBD2 generic? I like that it's very quick to go in and check if your monitors have passed. It's very quick to check quick codes. If you just want to grab codes, because you don't have to key everything in, year, make, model. Sometimes some vehicles want like 6 of the 17 VIN characters entered before you can get in. So sometimes mode 6, but generic OBD is just quick to access for erasing codes or getting codes. That's what I like about it. We're going to talk a little bit about mode 6, about the frustrations of mode 6 and the magic of mode 6. And remember, when we see that dollar sign is indicating that we're talking about a hexadecimal number, base 16. How many modes do we have within OBD2, guys?
10.
10 modes. The one that's not listed in your textbook is, or it may be now, is permanent codes. Is permanent codes listed under mode 10?
Yeah, page 503.
Excellent. So there's 10 modes within our OBD2 that we can look into. Key terms. These we'll see when we get into our mode 6 stuff. Component ID. That would indicate an EGR valve or a catalytic converter. A test ID would be something like rich to lean or lean to rich switch tests. Monitor ID would say EGR monitor, or evap monitor, which might encase many tests within that monitor. So our evap system runs more than one test, right? So component ID, monitor ID, PID is our parameter ID. That's our bit of information that we see, right? That's our scan tool data. And test ID. Please remember those. Generic and global OBD2 terms are used interchangeably. All I want to say about this slide, guys, is this was never intended for technicians to use mode 6. This was written by engineers in programming language for engineers, strictly that, and programmers. Okay, technicians were never intended to use this. I don't know how it first started being used by technicians, but obviously we had a programmer technician that was pretty smart, got into this and realized that there was a lot of good information that could be used here. And guys, can I state this? When we talk about mode 6 specifically, mode 6 is what I'm talking about, that we see often raw data. We don't get to see the actual numbers unless the scan tool converts them for us. Okay. This is a little like using a lab scope. It is not easy at first. It takes time. It is not something that just falls in your lap. You might get completely frustrated and not use mode 6 ever again. Some of you guys will embrace mode 6. I'm just going to tell you what it's capable of. You take it from there. So what do we have in the different modes, guys? Powertrain control, data, freeze frame for 2, diagnostic trouble codes. I do not need you to remember these. They are clearly listed in your menu. You don't need to remember them. You might hear me say this more than once today because I want to make sure that everybody's very clear because you felt that maybe you wanted to have a little bit more direction. Don't waste your memory on trying to remember all this stuff. We go to mode 4, and I think of these as filing cabinets, guys. So I'd open filing cabinet 4 to clear and reset DTCs, freeze frame, readiness monitors, okay? Non-continuous readiness monitors. What we're going to discover, mode 5, 6, and 7 is often grouped under one filing cabinet drawer. And there's a lot of confusion here, guys. There's a lot of confusion because OBD2 has morphed and changed over the years. So if I have everybody's attention for the next 30 seconds, you need to pay very close attention to what I'm going to say. Mode 5 is oxygen sensor monitoring test results. Mode 6 is continuous and non-continuous monitors.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Wait,
you hear me?
pause. What?
Continuous and non-continuous monitors.
Different from the book.
Yes. Mode 7.
Oh, and okay.
Mode 7. Pending codes. Are we clear? 502, 6, continuous and non-continuous. 7, pending codes. That is official. You might find discrepancies on different vehicles, but it doesn't matter. If you don't find what you need in one filing cabinet, look in the next. Okay? I promise I won't test you on it. I promise ITA won't test you on it because it is that slippery slope full of dog poo, right? I'm moving on. Mode 8. This is where we can do bidirectional controls, where I can command an EGR valve on or off, or a vent solenoid, or whatever in mode 8, okay? Mode 9, critical. Why is mode 9 so critical for me, guys?
Module identification.
Need to
And
know
what about module ID? What else is in there that's so critical for me?
It tells you what module controls what system.
What else would I find in mode 9? Calibration identification and calibration verification numbers. Write that down. What does that mean?
Could you repeat that?
Calibration identification and calibration verification numbers. What does that mean? You're writing it down. What is it? What am I referring to?
Is it the rational and functional?
No, nice try. Close. Well, guys, software version. This is where software version. What software does my PCM have in it for its flash programming? Okay, so remember we talked about TSB. You get a code, you check TSBs. If there's a reflash for the vehicle, do you know if that flash is in the car or not? Yes, because you're going to go to mode 9 and you're going to see the current software version. And if it's the same as the flash, the vehicle has already been updated. It's not your problem. But if there's a flash available, you're going to perform the update before you do any further diagnostic, right?
Right.
If you have the capability, right?
We all have the capability.
Don't you need a special scan tool for that?
You need a special scan tool. You need an interface.
Yeah, but you have to be able to connect it, right?
You do need some special equipment, but that is an interface. It goes between your PC or your scan tool and the data link connector.
Yeah.
And as of 2004, all vehicles are required to meet the J2534 legislation stating that they need to be able to be service programmed with the same protocol so that we can do it. And manufacturers are also required to provide us that updated information at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, so we have to buy the programming then.
You have to pay for a subscription for access. You have to buy the J2534 programmer, which is the interface between your PC and the data link connector. Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, you do.
Yeah.
But it means that you don't have to take a vehicle, ship it to the dealer, pay them $150, and then ship the vehicle back to you so that you can continue your diagnostic.
But how much does all that equipment cost and all of that? Because that could make or break that scenario, right? Because
no,
you're
it doesn't.
Not flashing cars all day.
We did a lot of flashing. Okay, if you're working on old cars, maybe not so much because the manufacturers don't support them forever, right? After 5 years, if they're having problems still, they're off warranty. They're not going to build a new software program because the check engine light's coming on, right? So if you're working on older cars, you might not be seeing a lot of flashing. If you're working on newer cars, you're going to see a ton of flashing, especially if you're working with the big 3 or Euros, right? Who can back me on this? Who's doing flashing or who's seeing it being done regularly, right?
Honda's, like, there's constant flashing of like BCM, PGMFI, HVAC.
Yes. And it's, guys, flashes fix stuff that is just staggering to me. Like, you can fix transmission problems without taking a transmission apart by changing line pressure, right? And smoothing a shift point out with programming rather than go in there and spend 18 hours replacing a seal that's not sealing as well as it should, right? Get it off warranty, then charge it for a tranny. That's what they're doing, right? Or what if check engine light comes on in a vehicle and the parameter is just a little bit too tight? We can open the parameter up and all of a sudden, we're not so close to the fail point. So just by recalibrating, right? Reprogramming. So I guess to answer your question, you got to judge that upon what you're working on and how many times you're sending stuff to a dealer and what the convenience of that is worth to you. Okay, so I have one. I still own it. It's in the garage. We used it quite regularly. We had lots of vehicles that were fleet vehicles that are new cars that were either off warranty or they didn't have time. This plumber's truck earns that company like $300, $400 an hour, right? For every hour it's sitting in the shop, that plumber is not selling hot water tanks and charging out his labor and drive trips at $200 an hour, right? So it's worth it for them just to get it fixed. Look, reflash it. I don't care if it's $150. My guy's sitting in your shop waiting for his car to be done. So we had that equipment. So
even like for us infotainment systems, we even have like reflashes for that.
Of course. Now remember this, guys. The flash that I have, and I'll bring it out when we look at the car, I'll show you what it looks like, is emission control only. It won't flash a infotainment system. It won't reflash a cluster. It's strictly for emissions. If you want to do that programming, then you need to buy a dealer level scan tool. Clear?
Yep.
Okay, moving on. This little bit of information here is gold. Okay. Once the enable criteria is met, PCM will run the monitor. Remember, just because the enable criteria is met does not mean the PCM will run the monitor, right? Because what if another monitor is running at the same time? It can't run two.
The conflict?
Yeah, we'd have a conflict. We'd have to resolve the conflict, wait till one test runs, look for the enable criteria to occur again, and then let it allow it to run, okay? So pass or fail, guys, we're storing those results. Once the monitors run, results go into mode 6 for continuous or non-continuous, okay? If mode 6 results a fail, pending code may be stored in mode 7. Freeze frame in mode 2. Next time, the next consecutive enable criteria, PCM will run the monitor again. Every time that monitor's run, new results are stored in mode 6.
Oh, and then it stores it in 3.
If the mode 6 result is a fail with the same code, turns on the mill. Okay?
Yep.
That's how all these modes with an OBD2 work. We don't see this interface when we're on the manufacturer side. We just select, oh, we'll go to codes. It doesn't say, mode, whatever. It just shows you codes, erase codes, data. You go through a different menu interface. It just looks different. truly it's the same. As I mentioned to you guys, we're used to base 10 numbers. Our PCMs work in binary or twos, 2 digits like zeros and ones, right? And hexadecimal is base 16. If you are working within mode 6 and you see hexadecimal numbers, or even within any of the modes within Global OBD2, you may need to convert numbers. I will show you how it's done. I will never ask you to do it again, okay? So on your computer and your phones, you have a calculator. So on my iPhone, if I have my calculator on and I rotate it 90 degrees, I get a scientific calculator. Okay, I don't know about your Android phones or whatever, but on my computer, I also have the same calculator. And top corner here, we call it the hamburger. If you click on the hamburger, it gives you all the different types of calculators that are available for you. Because this is programmer language, I hit programmer, and you'll notice here that it gives me hexadecimal, decimal, which is our 0 to 9, right? Octal or whatever, so it's base 8, and binary, which is base 2. So if I have a number that in hexadecimal, I'm just going to pick something. I'm going to select hexadecimal, and hexadecimal, remember, goes 0 through 9. And then goes A, B, C, D, E, F, up until we get to 16, which is our base 16. So if I was to suggest that I had a number of 1E7B, I just hit that number and it'll give me my base 10 number, my decimal number. So 1E7B is 7,000 whatever, right? 7,803. It'll also give me the binary number that the PCM would see. Are we okay with that? So you can use this to convert it into a number that you may be able to use or compare in a graph, okay? I've only had to do this once ever, okay? And I didn't know how to do it, so.
This just looks like a bunch of witchcraft to me.
Yeah, it does.
With wrenches.
It does. But again, are you a computer programmer? No, you're an automotive service technician. You shouldn't need to know this. But if you're going to use mode 6, you might have to learn some new stuff. Okay. So what we know, how would I know that this is a hexadecimal number?
What $sign in front of it?
There'll be a $sign, and then you know you need to convert it to base 10 if you want to understand what that number's value means. Moving on. All right.
When you say you need to convert it to base 10, is that the same as mode 10?
No, base 10 is the numbers that we talk about. When I say 99, that number would look very different in a hexadecimal value.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So just base 10 is the numbers that we talk about, not mode 10. Base 10 numbers, or binary, base 2, right? So zeros and ones.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Got it.
So I just have an example on my screen here without going back to the calculator, but 31, if I was to convert the number 31 into hexadecimal, it would be 1F. That would equal 31. Okay. I did have a programmer in one of my level 3 classes a few years ago, and he showed how to do it manually on the board. And the board, I took a picture of the whiteboard, but there was numbers all over this thing, and everybody got it, but it's like, well, that was 15 minutes of our lives we probably didn't need to waste. Calculator works just fine if you need to ever convert those values.
guess programmers are just built different. Because, Jesus.
Sorry, say that again.
I guess programmers are just built different. Because, like, Jesus Christ, I could not stand there for 15 minutes doing math and no, just no. Not
I
gonna
hear you.
happen.
And my question was why? Why don't we just go to base 10? But when your number values get very high, you only have, 6 characters that'll read you values in the millions. So it saves a lot of keystrokes, I guess, or programming language. I think that's what it's all about.
I guess that makes sense, but still, just trying to wrap my head around how that all works is.
It's a value, and we need to convert that value into usable data.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least
That's
there's
really what it comes down to, and it'll become more evident when we look at some of the examples that are in this chapter. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, reading over this chapter, I did struggle a bit. So.
Okay. Well, please let me know if you're still struggling by the time we're finished. I need to know.
All right.
And again, we'll do a demonstration on the vehicle, and we'll look at some of the Mode 6 data that's in the Corolla. Okay.
Okay.
So the frustrating thing for Mode 6 guys is finding information. Okay, and I've done this to previous classes. I said, okay, look up your car, give me the test ID for your catalytic converter and tell me what it's testing. And I got a lot of really frustrated students. So I don't do that anymore. What I will simply suggest is this is a character building session. If you want to get into this, you're going to have to spend some time and find how this system can help you with the vehicles that you're working on. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this Mode 6 test they're showing us as an example from that chapter. This fault can set a P0141. We're into the 100s, which is air fuel measurement, right? For bank 1, sensor 1, checking the service information, told us about the enable criteria. This enable criteria is not shown in Mode 6. Okay, we have to go to service information. If you're lucky, it'll give us this. Cold engine, idle, and below 66 degrees. The following monitors are suspended, so they won't run until we know, because really guys, I need to know that my O2 sensor is good before I use it for testing other systems, right? And the Mode 6 data we'll see is down here. And guys, it's not necessarily going to tell me any of this. It's going to tell me test ID 06, CID 41, and I got to figure out what the hell that is. But once I've determined that that is in fact, bank 1, sensor 1 heater circuit, I can look at the test results. And your book specifically says it shows the minimum or maximum value that we should see. Okay. Sometimes both are shown, but we'll talk about that. So basically, guys, the maximum limit. So the number cannot exceed 186. The value, what does this value represent, guys? 33. Is this current? Is this voltage? Is this time? I don't know. I need to find out more about this to be able to break down these numbers and tell me what they're telling us here. It doesn't make any sense to me, but the beauty of Mode 6 is maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe when I look at this number and I look at the maximum value of 186 and I see a measured value of 33, guys, how does this look? Would you say that this test is well within its threshold?
Yeah.
It's nowhere, I don't think this test is anywhere near 186 and ready to fail. So without being engineering and going through and figuring everything out, spending an hour on this to figure out what all this test ID and everything else means, bottom line is I know that this test is okay. Okay, this is the PCM running the test. And if the PCM is the one setting the codes and turning on the check engine light, I want to see its results, not mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we'll look at a couple other examples here. Again, guys, they're giving me a minimum value and an actual value. And what they mean by current value, guys, is not necessarily electrical current.
But like the actual value?
The latest test result is showing 794. So 512 is minimum. I don't know what 512 represents. Ford uses conversion numbers, and you multiply this number by 0.07863 or something like that, and you come up with a value that makes sense. Again, programmer talk, don't care. I will do that if I'm instructed to do so through Ford service literature. But what I'm just looking at the raw numbers here, guys, the raw numbers look like a pass to me. I'm not going to chase this any further. I'm going to kick it out the door and say I'm happy with these results. The next one, guys, is brilliant. Why is this so brilliant? Because this scan tool is taking the raw data and putting it into numbers and values that I understand. And that is the capability of a scan tool, but not all scan tools are doing it. Okay, so if the scan tool will give us this value, because guys, if I looked at the raw data on the factory side, it's going to look the same. Right? I wouldn't be able to make heads or tails of PIDs or values or numbers. It's basically being converted into something that we can understand. So in this case, my raw mode 6 data is being converted by my scan tool and presenting me numbers that I get. I don't have to convert. I don't have to think. I see what this is telling me. And the beauty of what it's telling me, guys, is did we do this test? You guys did this test for me on your Picoscope, right? You guys measured the lean to rich and the rich to lean and gave me that data. What you didn't have to do was connect up to the vehicle, back probe the O2 sensor, snap throttle, get your test results, right? You didn't have to do that. I did that for you, and you still spent some time getting the results up. Did you not?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it be easier just to go into mode 6? If you were able to find this information, dig through all the garbage, maybe have a scan tool that does give you real numbers that we understand. So guys, what do you notice about the maximum limit here? That's significantly longer than I gave you. I said 100 milliseconds.
1.5. So 1.5.
This is 155 milliseconds. So they've got a little bit more leeway, right, before they're actually going to fail this test. And what if GM was having a whole bunch of problems with these O2 sensors? What if it was taking 160 milliseconds? They say 155 is the cutoff. They could actually just reprogram this thing so the maximum limit were changed if they wanted to. And then all of a sudden the check engine light wouldn't come on anymore if my measured value was higher than 155. So say they set it to 180. And this is just an example, guys. I'm not saying they're doing this. I'm saying this is what they can do. They're setting the parameters for pass or fail. Okay. But guys, what if we had, this may not be the best example, but say we put an oxygen sensor in here. Let's just say we're super cheap that day and we put a used oxygen sensor. Why would we ever do that? That would be stupid. But let's just say we did that on this one day. We couldn't get one. We happened to have one on a wrecked vehicle in our parking lot. So we grabbed that oxygen sensor. We fired it in the vehicle. Well, guess what? I could go in here and see if that O2 sensor was okay. So I'm going to say the first one failed. Didn't look at the result, but I'm going to say we're allowed 155, and I'm going to say the used sensor we put in is sitting at 154.
No good.
We're not going to ship this car out the door, are we?
No.
The monitor would pass, and that's what would show up on our main screen when we do our health check. But it's so close to failing, guys, that the good chance the customer's going to drive out, and the next time it tests, it might be over that 155. Because it's just pass fail.
Question.
So, yep.
So if let's say you put the used O2 sensor, we still have to go through like the criteria to test it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it still needs to be see the enable criteria before it'll actually monitor this test, because this is a rich to lean. So what does it need? It needs the O2 sensor. It needs to be online. We need to be in closed loop. And then it's going to need to monitor a fast throttle position sweep for enrichment mode, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it needs to, in this case, actually needs to see a deceleration.
Decel. Yeah.
And then watch to make sure that that switch time is happening with, and then it'll store that. Once it sees that and has that enable criteria, it'll store the results here.
Okay.
Okay. A lot faster than setting up a lab scope. But again, you might discover that some of these tests give you straight data that makes sense and you're happy with it. And you might really begin to embrace or love Mode 6. On the other side of the coin, we're going to look at some examples on the Corolla that's not quite so clear cut. Okay. So there'll be some smog, some fuzzy areas, but you will potentially find something that's very valuable. Where did I use Mode 6, guys? It was invaluable for me working on Ford vehicles in 1996 to 2004-ish for misfires. Ford did not supply a misfire counter. And if I got a random misfire code, I didn't know which cylinder was mostly affected. So how do you know which ignition coil to test or swap? Right? How do you know which injector might be or spark plug? I mean, guys, you've got an 8-cylinder engine. Do you just replace everything? You want to isolate it. And the way we were able to isolate it was we were able to go into Mode 6 and look at the raw data in Mode 6, and we could actually figure out which cylinders had the most misfires. You couldn't do it any other way. So it was absolutely brilliant for that. And I use Mode 6 for diagnosing Ford misfires regularly. Fast and accurately, without guessing, without replacing all the all the coils and replacing all the spark plugs, right? There's other examples in here, guys, and they're just the same thing. You see a minimum value or a maximum value, sometimes both. And you're just looking to make sure that we're okay. Okay. This states global OBD2 has 9 modes. Again, global OBD2 is always evolving, hence the 5, 6, 7 mode confusion. Adding a 10th mode for permanent codes, and permanent codes are there so that emission testing stations are able to verify that someone's just not erasing the codes, disconnecting the battery and driving it through an emission control station with no check engine light on, because it'll turn off the check engine light, but the permanent code will still be stored in Mode 10.
And wouldn't the readiness monitors not be ready then if something's on like that then?
That's right. But here's the thing. So say, this is common, guys. So say a catalytic converter set a code. Okay, so CAT is not working right. You disconnect the battery, plug the battery back in, that turns off the check engine light, erases all the monitors, erases codes, erases freeze frame, right? You start the vehicle up and you don't let it run a CAT cycle. So you don't drive it for 4 minutes. It'll set all the other monitors, no check engine light because the cat monitor didn't run, and then you drive it through a test facility and you pass. Why do you pass? Because everybody in this room earlier that said, yes, I drive regularly in my cat and I drive at 4 minutes on a steady throttle. I think I got 2 hands up in the entire room that said you did that. Well, you guys are pretty typical of the general population. So many people don't get an opportunity to set a cap because they live in town and the traffic and this and that or short trips. So rather than AirCare failing everybody, they said, okay, guys, if you have one monitor, doesn't matter which one it is, that hasn't been able to run a test, we'll still pass you. Okay, but now we have a permanent code. So if you've got a permanent code stored, monitor hasn't run for a cat and it's a cat code, they can say fail. Drive your car in the highway, or we'll run it on the dyno for you. That's what AirCare would offer. We can run on the dyno for you and test your exhaust emissions instead. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah.
Guys, what I'd like to do at this juncture, we've got still a fair amount to cover today. But I would like to just address any questions you have with chapter 37, so onboard diagnostics. As I mentioned, it's pretty much review from level 1, but for some of you guys, level 1 was quite a while ago. So is there anything here that's fuzzy?
Well, the most important thing is just what? Verify customer concerns, and in the end, just verify the repair. That's pretty much it.
So
And
yes,
everything.
absolutely. So we need to verify repair, verify complaint, but there is something else. Do you guys remember something, a test question in your CAT section?